Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. The 30th Annual HACR Symposium afternoon session will begin in 5 minutes. We ask that you silence your mobile devices at this time. Our program will resume in 5 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon to those of you joining us here in Los Angeles and those tuning in from across the country. Here to kick off our afternoon session, welcome back HACR Senior Vice President of Operations and Interim Director of Research, Sylvia Perez Cash.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. I'm glad that you all came back. We didn't lose you to the coffee breaks in between. We have a very exciting afternoon for you. But before we get started, I get to do the honors of announcing another round of gifts. How's that for today? This time for our virtual audience. So we have always, everybody wave to our virtual audience, right? We are also gifting a couple of copies of Monica Diaz's book, From Intent to Intention, and I have the names here. Sandra Arellano from USAA, Norma Perez, the DEI partner from MGM Resorts International, and Joanne Trevino from USAA as well. USAA really racked up today. So thank you so much for joining us virtually, for joining us from across the country, and for engaging with us in this important dialogue. And our audience also appreciates you, right? So thank you. So as we know, this morning we had a number of very interesting and important conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, really looking at this topic that we all care so deeply about from a number of different perspectives, specifically from the different functions within our companies, your companies, that touch this space. We know that this work isn't done in a silo, and we know that this work isn't done alone. And so understanding all the perspectives that go into it and how every different function is looking into this work, into these priorities, and frankly, into the data, which will come tomorrow, is key to understanding how we can advance our shared goal of Hispanic inclusion in corporate America. So we know that just starting with the lunch that we had with Pilar Ramos, what an amazing journey. What an amazing leader. And she comes from the legal background as general counsel. I mean, we know that there's not many Latinas in that role. I'm proud of her for that. Never mind the fact that she earned her place every single bit. We're reading together the perspectives from ERG leaders starting this afternoon. We know that we have these leaders are key advocates, some of our key advocates in our companies. Many of you here play that role in your company. Those ERGs are our organizing voice. They are our authentic voice. They are a direct connection of companies to our communities and to you. We couldn't be more thrilled to have that conversation this afternoon, led by my colleague, our Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and Engagement, Jai Vargas, who we've heard from today, and I welcome back to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. For me today. I guess I don't need a microphone, but if you could turn it on, thank you so much. This next topic and conversation is going to focus on employee resource groups. Employee resource groups, as you know, have grown and evolved from spaces where we just bring in mofongo and mangu and elote, pupusas to work, right? Yes, pupusas, right? Making sure that our colleagues understand our traditions, our culture, our language, our people. Those are all such beautiful spaces, safe spaces, and they're very important. The reason why these groups have evolved is because corporations have tapped us to not just assume what us as Latinx professionals need when it comes to development, but they really want to know from us, what is it that you need to go from point A to point B in your career? And they shouldn't ever assume that we may only need a mentor. Maybe we need a champion, an ally, a sponsor. We know that what we measure gets done. And so we know that also successful ERGs transitioning to being business resource groups have intentionality, they have a strategy, they have great leaders that are very much in tune with not just the diversity initiatives and the goals, but the overall corporation's goals. And so when you're running an employee resource group, your goal should always be to strive to be a business resource group. The biggest difference from an affinity group and a cultural group that has fun and shares food and talks about supporting the community is making sure that you have intentionality and strategy. And in that strategy, you're helping the organization source diverse candidates, Latinx professionals that look just like me and you. Also making the time and the space to create intentional programming that has everything to do with professional and personal development. And when we run these programs, it isn't just for Latinos and by Latinos. Everyone in the organization should show up to our event and say, I can benefit from this program that the HOLA group is hosting. I want to support, I want to become an ally, and I want to see how I can help them while learning in the process. Business resource groups are incredibly connected to the business imperative. How do we as a business resource group help this organization source diverse candidates, right? And not just source them, but help them advance. Make sure that we connect them to mentors and champions and sponsors so that they can go up the corporate ladder. I always talk about there being two very specific people in the workplace. Those that say, why me? Why is this my responsibility and job? I'm here to do accounting. You want to create programming for Latinos? You find someone who can do that full time. And then there's the second person that says, why not me? Who better than to do this work than me? I'm living this experience. I know what I need as a professional to grow in this career. Anthony from State Street, who's in the room and is an incredible leader when it comes to their employee resource group at State Street. He connects with other allies, other employee business groups to make sure that they work together. Because we don't ever want someone to come into our space when we're running these ERGs and programs, open that door and say, oh, this is a safe space, let me leave them alone so that they can do whatever they need. When they need me, they'll call. Anthony makes sure that all of the other ERGs are present, right? And they share those programs and those invitations. For those of you who don't know me, I actually deliver, develop, and engage with all of those programs. This Hispanic Heritage Month, I am delivering 27 of those programs for many of you here. And so we thank you for being able to stretch yourselves, to being here, to learning. But make sure that you bring some of this intentionality back. The individuals that are going to join me on stage today have experience in running business resource groups. You're going to learn from them best practices, challenges, and pitfalls that they've had. I want to share with you a little bit about them, and they're going to elaborate. A good friend of mine, Priscilla Guaso, is going to come up to the stage. We also have Victoria Morales, who's here from Meta. She's going to tell us all about what this metaverse actually is, because I still have no idea. So she's going to tell us all about that. And Elliot Segarra from Accenture. Please welcome my panelists to the stage for this incredible session. Awesome. Elliot Segarra from Accenture again. We have Priscilla Guaso, whom you just heard from on the HR panel. She's from CDW. She also is a founder and an author, Latinas Rising Up in HR. Please buy that book. And Victoria Morales from the Metaverse, from Meta. Thank you so much for being here. And you are local, so you didn't have to come far.
Not too far.
Love that. Victoria, share with us a little bit more about your personal and professional career. Let us know what you're all about. And I love your bio, by the way. Her last line in her bio is, I spent a lot of time deep conditioning my curls. And I was like, I love her curls.
You know, that last line is important to me because when I started my career out in recruiting, I did not see many people who looked like me. And even to find people who showed up in their natural hair, who were comfortable being their authentic selves, that was a rare occurrence. When I came over to Facebook at the time, where we're now Meta, it was the first time I started to see women showing up with their natural hair. And that seems like a small thing, but it creates such an immediate moment of safety when you're looking around the room and you're like, I can connect. So I do include that in my bio quite intentionally, because I think it's an important part of my heritage. I started my career roughly 10 years ago in recruiting, focused on software engineering in New York. And so I was really working with startups and how would they start to build out some of their teams. I loved that work so much that I wanted to come internally and build at a greater scale. And so when I came to Facebook, I really did start on the recruiting side of the house and looking at how do we build more strategies to bring in Latinos, to bring in underrepresented people of color, and those who are historically marginalized. So that's always been really, I think, a passion for me, is how do we show up and take the seats that really do belong to us. I've had the opportunity in my time at Meta to move over to the central DEI team, where I have the pleasure of leading our Latinx group today and really being the community engagement manager and looking at how we are, to your point, not just showing up and having parties and fun, though we should, and I enjoy the food and I hope we have the elote still, but also how are we making an impact? So how do we dive into the businesses that we're all a part of and really reach back for the rest of our community?
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Please add her, not just on Facebook, but also LinkedIn. Priscilla, tell us a little bit more about your role. You do talent development at CDW, and you're also a speaker and an author, Latinas Rising Up in HR. Tell us more about your story.
So I've been in HR for now almost 16 years, and I started off in hospitality and really took my career all over human resources. I actually wanted to be an event planner when I first started, and then realized, you know, these late nights working, it's not gonna budge for me. That J-Lo life of the wedding planner was not in the stars for me. So I made a pivot and actually ended up in HR, and my career has continued in that space. I love touching recruitment and talent acquisition, because we can actually help influence in changing the numbers. And then from there, realized, you know, while hospitality is phenomenal and it's still in my heart, I made a switch over to healthcare. And that during COVID was rough, very rough. But about 2.5 years, did employee relations, did all the investigations, and then from there realized I think I need to take a pause and get my energy back of being in HR. I didn't want to be that HR person that was just burnt out and just was like, great, go back home, I don't care about your problems. I wanted to continue doing my job in HR. So took a year off, built Latinas Rising Up in HR, and still missed HR. So I'm like, no, I need to go back. And now I do talent development for CDW and technology. I love it. We are a technology company. We were previously the computer discount warehouse. For those of you that don't know CDW, we now do software. We're more, I would say, services, tech services. And so you'll see us many times in that space. But I love it because, like you said, I get to actually impact and influence how it is our BRGs work with their promotions and development and make change and look at the stats. And I get really nerdy with numbers. But that now I can actually make a different change. And like you said earlier, being Latina, I'm in this space. This is my life. This is my experiences. Why wouldn't I make a change, right? Why wouldn't I be a part of that?
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Elliot, tell us a little bit more. How long have you been at Accenture? I know that you're an executive sponsor to the Latinx group there. How has your career journey evolved?
Yeah, well, thank you. So glad to be here, and thank you for the invitation to speak. Yes, I grew up just outside of Chicago, Northwest Indiana. I consider myself a Chicago Rican. From Puerto Rico. I started my career in automotive, and then after 6 years of that, decided to kickstart my career in consulting. And so I've been with Accenture now for about 18 years. I started as a supply chain practitioner, leading and driving supply chain transformations across multiple industries, oil and gas, chemical, and high tech. And then as my journey at Accenture, was progressing, I found not a gap, but not that I wasn't, but wait, no one, I can't really see anybody that looks like me or has a similar story than me. Growing up, like many of you in this room, being the first to go to college, the first white collar job, And so I made it a point, once it was made available to me and I saw a room of Latinos, I was like, wow, once I'm an executive at Accenture, I'm not gonna wait, I'm not gonna make others wait as long. And so I made it my passion and part of my journey to be available and be a voice and a face that people can reach out to within the firm. And so that's how I got involved in the ERG. I've been leading the ERG for about 6 years now, and we've evolved from, getting together for margaritas on Cinco de Mayo to now driving a lasting impact within our organization, where the organization looks to us to really understand the pulse of the community, understand the engagement, and how can they serve and be better leaders to our Hispanic and Latino community. About 3 years ago, I transitioned over to more account management. So I manage a relationship between multiple accounts within our chemicals portfolio in the Midwest. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Thank you. Victoria, I'm going to come back to you because there's an interesting connection here. The CEO from Accenture, her name is Julie Sweet. She mentioned that they actually onboarded 100,000 employees through the metaverse. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. Do they put on these goggles and then there's the interviewer there? And I went, what? Tell us a little bit more about the metaverse and how we as Latinos can start to learn more and engage, and how you're doing that internally as well with Latinos at Meta.
Yeah, and I think I had a similar kind of thought as you, right? When I first started to learn about what we were building, how would this work? How would I imagine myself in this kind of reality? And one of the things that I think has been really important is to think about, how do we show up now? How can we be a part of this? Often technology can be a barrier if we feel that we don't have the competency to be a part of that moment. We've been talking quite a lot in the Latina organization at Meta about the average age of a Latino in the United States, which is 11 years old today. And so if we're talking about the future, it is us. We have to be there, there's no choice. And so some of the things that we're doing to help really bridge that for our Latin community internally, we're doing things like showing people how to get into the metaverse. So to answer your question, how can I put on this headset and meet my teammate in a virtual room and have a conversation and be able to have that in-person almost feeling without having to be in the same office or location? And so we're doing a lot of that. Really, how do we just get involved? How can we be a part of testing and really be sure that our voices are being heard while we're building out this product? And so I think it's definitely more to come, but if you did not already start to get into the metaverse, I highly recommend taking a look. We have some pretty exciting content that comes out from our sites.
I love that. That is very cool. Priscilla, I want to ask you, because you are in talent management and talent development, what do you think are some of the skill sets Latino professionals particularly need to be able to evolve their career?
One of the biggest things that I'm seeing is strategic thinking. And that is, you don't just get that. It's something that evolves through your career, but you have to be given those opportunities to be able to showcase those skills and learn from it and learn from your mistakes. And so that's one of the areas that I am seeing that I would love to see more Latinos get that experience, to be able to make those mistakes. But it's especially as we become executives, we need to have that skill. And honestly, that's something that at CDW are working very heavily and focused on, is how do we create those opportunities, whether it's through rotational programs, whether it's giving short-term, long-term assignments, whether it's just a short program that they're going through. Again, just trying to give those opportunities, because not everyone gets that every day.
Nice. Strategic thinking. I love that. Elliot, you've mentioned that you've been leading the ERG for 6 years now. Can you share with us one of the most important pillars that you focus on to be able to distinguish your ERG from just an ERG to being directly impacting Accenture's bottom line?
Well, there's two, I think. One is the professional development pillar. So we, as part of the ERG, we make it a priority to create a safe space for our people to feel engaged, to feel like a safe space where they can test out some leadership capabilities. So we have a national structure and a local structure to provide our folks opportunities to lead. And so there's a lot of programming around professional development, understanding, developing your brand, board of directors, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's foundational to the ERG is a sense of an engagement, community, around creating a safe space for development. I think the one that I think is important and a huge opportunity is what we call market. So how do we engage the ERG with our clients, right? And so, like all of us, right, we're all in the same boat, rowing together, headed to the same destination. How can we attract, retain, develop Latino talent? And so, by using our ERGs as a way to engage in a very, just in a natural, authentic way, to show up differently together, to partner, to drive the needle forward. So, for us, it's been an opportunity to interact with some of our clients, and how do we co-host events? How do we partner? During Hispanic Heritage Month is a great opportunity to connect not only with our clients, but some of our partners. And we kicked off Hispanic Heritage Month with a broadcast, and Sid was one of our panelists, and he did an amazing job. And so, together with our partners and our clients, how can we use the ERGs to show up differently?
I love that, and thank you for inviting Sid.
Yeah.
He does a great job. Victoria, can you share with us some examples of how you all at Meta and at Facebook differentiate between an ERG and a BRG? What's been the evolution? What was the game changer that made you go from food flags and fun to business imperative?
It's such a great question. I think what's also interesting is we're a large company. So you mentioned Meta, Facebook. We also have Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus. And so that means that we have an MRG, which is our employee resource group, Meta Resource Group, that sits across each region. And they actually look at all of our parts of our products and companies. And then we also have what we call business resource groups that are embedded into each of those products. And so that allows us to have, I think, one, a really great understanding of what's happening globally, and then also where do we have opportunity locally to be more engaged. That process of evolving, I would say, has been much more organic than anything else. I think especially for Latinos, we do raise our hand and we want to be involved. When we look at where I think Meta has provided great support for that community is really anchoring on committees. So we have 4 Cs, similar I think to what you were talking through with development. We're looking at career, company culture, and then also community. And we have anchoring moments in the year where we're really bringing people together around those topics. And so that has really, I think, been the greatest thing for us to see, is that we're bringing business resource groups, the Meta resource group together, and we're driving content and programming throughout. I think you asked, what is the biggest win from that? For us, it's that we understand all of the parts of our business. If we look at each individual brand, they have their own way of recruiting. They're going to have their own type of people they're looking for. If we're on Instagram, hopefully you're a creative. You want to be really involved in that space. If we're looking at WhatsApp, we're probably the largest consumer for that product globally. And so we want our people to be in those rooms and in those conversations.
I love that. Who here has WhatsApp? Raise your hand. All of us.
If
You've all received a WhatsApp message from your tia this morning. Bendiciones. We've all received that this morning. We receive it. Priscilla, talk to us a little bit more about talent development. So when we're running these programs in the BRG, we want to make sure that we are developing our talent. Tell us how often you survey your BRG members, what you've learned from some of the data, and how quickly you can implement those programs.
So we've actually integrated it with our employee pulse surveys that we constantly take, and we are able to pull out different data points based on that. So that way we're looking at it holistically, and then we can narrow in, right, and see where maybe the gaps are or where the strengths are, because we want to take a look at the full picture. Another great thing that we do that I won't say we have it perfect, we're all still growing in this space, right, is around our talent review process. And so whenever anyone's going up and you're thinking about succession planning, right, as an organization, do we have Latinos at that table? Are they getting ready? Are they ready now? Are they ready in 2 to 3 years? Are they ready in 5 years? And so that's something that we are constantly looking at and trying to integrate that now with, well, also how are these opportunities, development opportunities through our BRGs, through leadership, how is that helping them in their leadership journey? So really eyeballing that, making sure that the leadership roles that one takes in a BRG, that it's not just a nice to have role, it's truly helping you build leadership and building you exposure, bringing you that opportunity to be seen, that visibility component within the organization. And so there's so many different components that we take a look at when it comes to our BRGs, that being one of the main ones, because again, succession, that's where it's at. We want to see more Latinos in higher roles. And so again, we have to take a look at what's the BRG, what's the membership look like versus what our future succession talent pipeline looks like, and bridging that together.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Elliot, you've been leading the BRG for quite some time. Tell us about what areas you focus on, how many people are in your subcommittees, where they're located, how many chapters you have, everything. We want to know it all.
Yeah, so, very proud to have seen our ERG grow since I came on board. We represent about 4,000 plus members across 31, 32 chapters. We also have a group in Europe a Latino group in Europe that reached out from Germany, and they stood up their own HERG, which we're very proud of. We have a local and a national structure, and again, our pillars and our support is aligned to professional development, our community, and our market, which is our client. We also have an operations team that kind of supports our locations with data and budgets, et cetera, et cetera. But what we like to do is kind of create the pipeline for the committees that are handled at the local level, and we have a similar mirror structure at the local level. And so we encourage our people within the local level when they're ready to kind of step up and take on a national role. And so we try to create the pipeline of leadership so we'll continue to drive innovation and to drive engagement within the HERG. Another key benefit to our ERG has been engagement, right? Those that, we've seen that if you're part of an ERG, you tend to be more engaged at Accenture. And so being able to support, encourage, celebrate that is something that we like to do from an organization perspective.
Thank you for sharing that. Victoria, piggybacking off of what Elliot is mentioning on engagement, one of the biggest challenges that ERG leaders have is getting people to show up to these events, right? Before, the challenge was show up after work, everyone's already in the building, you had physical bodies. Now, since we have a little bit of a Zoom fatigue and an overwhelm of meetings and being in front of the computer, how do you all get people to show up virtually?
This is definitely the question that everyone was asking when we started this pandemic. I will say I think it's given us a lot of opportunity. When we think about the virtual experience, you're absolutely right, people have Zoom fatigue. I mean, I have probably by 11 a.m. a little bit of Zoom fatigue myself. And so we want to be really thoughtful. So it forced us as a team to think about what is going to be most impactful. What do we know that our communities are needing to hear? What do we know that they're asking for in terms of support? And how do we make sure that we meet them in that exact moment? We're also a very metrics-based company. And so we're constantly looking at engagement in a similar way on our platform. Are people commenting? Are they interacting? Are they chatting about it afterwards? Are we seeing event programming show up in hashtags? So we get a lot of insight from the team and from our community around like what's resonating. If we see there's no comments for a session, that's really good intel for us that perhaps this content is not what the community is looking for. So it's forced us, I think, to be much more data-driven than really ever before, and I think also to be sure that we're intentional with the programming that we are providing.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
If I may, can I add something?
Yes, please.
I think we've all experienced the screen fatigue. I think another plug for the metaverse is using the metaverse as a way to engage in events. And so we've hosted a couple meet and greets, and we did a professional development session for our HERG within the metaverse. And at first,
the Oculus goggles.
With the Oculus
and
goggles, and some were in 2D, so you don't have to have an Oculus to participate.
Okay.
But the response, so we said, well, we're just going to try it out. We're not sure how this is going to turn out. It could be a complete failure. There could be 3 people, but we're gonna test it out. And to our surprise, the level of support, engagement, and excitement around it, for many people, it was their first time experiencing the metaverse, and so it created a different space to engage and interact with folks that you don't get physical face-to-face, but also it's so different than being on a screen. So it was really neat, and we're trying to, so we launched a kind of a metaverse pillar within our corporate team to help identify and create events using the metaverse to engage our community.
I love that. Fantastic. So what I'm hearing is that we're going to get Oculus goggles at the next HACR event. Yes. So that we can be in the metaverse, we don't get left behind when it comes to technology, and we can support this entire mission. I would love that. For any of you up here, can you share how your executive sponsors have given you access, influence, impact, money We know money is a big deal when getting things done within the BRG. So this question is for whoever wants to share how they've leveraged their executive sponsor in this.
I can go. I would say in general, the executive sponsor, I mean, it's that exec, they're the sponsor, they're the ones advocating for the BRG when we're not in the room, right? And making sure that we are always tying back to the business, because we're not in those conversations, at those higher levels, behind closed doors. Really, where is the company going? Really, what is happening financially? Really, where is that impact? And that executive sponsor does to that exact piece for us, right? And I've seen it in the different organizations that I've been a part of, is that they're just constantly advocating, ensure that we have a budget, that we're making impact. Because you can't make a big impact if you don't have budget, right? I think we even spoke about this previously, of we need to ensure that there's always budget behind what we're doing, but that we can also measure it, right? To ensure that we're making a change. But overall, the executive sponsor is that key component that just helps, again, navigatorship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think, too, what's important is how to get creative, right? So there's a lot of intersectionality between our ERG, and so, how do you get creative and bringing along other ERGs to participate and just help them think a little bit differently of, well, funding's important, and money's important to do things, but how can you get creative and find alternative ways on how to achieve the same result? And so as exec sponsor, again, it's kind of having those conversations, advocating for our people, making sure that, again, the work is passion, and it's del corazón, right? People are working nights and weekends to drive the ERGs, and recognition is important. And so how do we ensure that the efforts and the work that's being put in by our chapter leads, our committee members, are getting recognized in the way that translates into, talent priority, or turns into, comp, a true differentiator, right? Because we call them plus ones, and for many people, this plus one is a lot, right? And so how do we, as a sponsor, how do we ensure to create the space and have the right conversations to have the conversation to say, look, these contributions are very significant to our community. I would translate them to X, Y, and Z, and so it could be a true differentiator.
Thank you for sharing that. So I want to put myself in the audience's position. What if there's someone in the audience and says, we don't have a very big budget. It's difficult to get leadership behind some of these initiatives and our goals. What would you suggest to that individual on how to get creative? What they can do from now until the end of the year to make a big splash, an impact, and something that you can measure? What would you say to any one of you?
I can start us here. I think I would say first to think about the impact. A big splash doesn't need to be 17 events from now until December. It might be one that you do really well, that everybody is really needing in that point in time. I think we're going to come to the end of the cycle, right? So many of us will be going through performance reviews. What we do internally is we're looking at how do we actually meet the need. I, as a Latino, have a very bad habit of writing on my performance review, we, the team, supported. And we have to actually learn to start sitting in our seats and to say, no, I drove that, I facilitated, I led the team. And we knew that that would be an issue we had to solve at scale. And so we actually started to look at how do we bring our executive sponsor in, how do we build a program around this moment, and so that when we're meeting the community in that time, your leadership team knows exactly how to plug in. Then it's, hey, there's the 3 asks that we have for you around this event. We know that this is where the need is. We know there's going to be value here. We reach out to our XFN partners, so cross-functionally. If we don't have budget, we do have experts. We all work at companies that are filled with people who are the best in their field. And so we really want to make sure that we're tapping our internal community. We have people in our ERG who sit on policy, who are sitting in reality labs building the metaverse. We have people who are sitting in recruiting. And so we're looking at how do we leverage our community to help get greater visibility. But then I think also to your previous question, where does our exec sponsor lean in and start to amplify the goodness and really a call to action for their peers?
I love that. Would anyone else like to add?
I agree in the sense of looking at the numbers, trying to see where the biggest impact is happening in your organization. Is the gap in recruiting, is the gap in supplier diversity, is the gap in development, and where, again, representation is across your organization. So once you lean in and understand where that is, and then to your point, that we're great at, I can use other people's budgets.
Yes.
and being like, hey, I noticed that you have a partner over here. How do we work together? And when there's free labor in the sense, right? But there's passion, like you mentioned earlier, and we see that at the end of the day, it's for the bigger good of the organization. Most of the time, teams jump on board fully. They jump on board.
Beautiful. I would love for one of you to give me an example of how you've partnered with another BRG, whether it's the disabilities BRG, the veterans group, the women, the caretakers, the generation XYZ, et cetera. Give me a concrete example of when you've partnered with another BRG to share resources, right? Because it's important for us to remind everyone our program doesn't have to happen during Hispanic Heritage Month. Right? It doesn't have to be only September 15th through October 15th where we raise our hand and every program is jammed into that month, right? But what happens during Black History Month? Where are our Afro-Latinos on those panels, right? Disability Awareness Month. And it's important to be able to partner to support their cause as well. So do any one of you here want to share an example of how you've partnered?
Sure, that's right. One of many. We have an ERG. It's called the Wealth Creation ERG. So it's more on creating the financial acumen of either through how to invest or how to buy a house or how to manage a checkbook. And we partner with the Wealth Creation ERG to kind of set the context around financial acumen in the Latino community, right? And so I grew up a very blue-collar household, and so when it comes to finances, at this level, like it's almost like you don't really have anyone that you can talk to. No one will really understand, and I always feel embarrassed if I try to approach a family member because it's so. How do you create that safe space to have those conversations around how do you create wealth, manage wealth, and kind of invest or spend the wealth with as being part of a Latino community where for many of us we're living paycheck to paycheck kind of thing, and so and it was very successful because there were a lot of our community were in the same boat. No one said it, right? But everyone appreciated the fact that we had this session to kind of share the do's and the don'ts that around financial acumen.
I love that. Does anyone else want to share how they've partnered?
Yeah, in my past life, when we had our BRGs, we actually did a lot around Women's History Month because there's just so much intersectionality that goes with Women's History Month, and so it was the idea of how do we pull from every BRG, regardless if there's women or not. Just we all came together during that month to say this is what we're focusing on as a group, and really a lot of the times I know it seems so tough, but it's as simple as just having a conversation. What is your calendar this year? Yeah. What are you focusing on? And being intentional and saying, let's work together during this month, because to your point, it can be overwhelming the entire year. There's always something, as we should be celebrating all year, but when we're very intentional, which programs will be the ones we actually focus in on, that's where you make the big impact. And it's all together, which is really nice. I
love that. Fantastic. I want to give a shout out to Best Buy because they had an incredible Pride/Latinx ERG session on intersectionality. So bravo, Best Buy, because that was a fantastic program. Yes. Everyone here is rooting for you. Let's go, Best Buy. Go pick up an Oculus at Best Buy.
There you go.
There it is.
It's all about intersectionality. So make sure that if you're planning a strategy for next year, you look at the entire calendar and you say, how can I be intentional about Black History Month, then Women's History Month, Latina Equal Pay Day, right? Disability Awareness Month, Pride Month. All of those opportunities is a way for us to say, we have a queer Latina, we have a non-binary individual who identifies as Latinx. They could be fantastic in your program, right? Have a roster of subject matter experts that comes from you so that you can have champions in every one of those conversations. Because sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot if we sort of keep to ourselves. It's beautiful that you brought up the fact that you have a wealth creation ERG. There's a trend going on that we're no longer doing the race, the gender, or the ethnicity ERGs, but innovation, right? Pipeline development, financial literacy. Those are incredible and they're intersectional. Anybody can belong to this conversation. You want to build a product with us? You can be from any background. We're here for the same mission, however, we have a diverse perspective. So we're not just creating these bubbles and silos all over. When people open the door, they're like, oops, it's their safe space, let me leave them alone. No, we've got to start opening up those doors. We want to make sure that the Latino group is putting on the most impactful professional development session, so that every other ERG is like, oh my goodness, they're having a session on how to be a more confident public speaker. I want to go to that event, right? And having them not assume like, oh, they may be speaking in Spanish, let me not, right? A lot of people say that. And so this is really beautiful. What else can you all share with us that we haven't already spoken about when it comes to BRGs and ERGs?
I think to build on the calendar, right, just kind of understanding the calendar and when things fit, I think it's important to have the proper communication plan and engaging in your leadership to help amplify and share those activities to garner to get the representation, the participation from the leaders, right? And so if you look at our local structure, right, it's kind of a very junior leadership team. And they're creating programming for that location, for that community. And so how do we use the leadership to help bring leadership support to those events? And so communication is, I think, critical and almost just as important as kind of aligning on the calendar is who and how is your leadership going to help amplify the event and to get the participation. And a lot of times, if you want to get leadership participation, create an event and make it about them. Who doesn't love to talk about themselves, right? So come introduce yourself to our Latino community, and they'll give you 30, 45 minutes to just talk about themselves. So
I love it. I love it. That's true, right? And so building off of that as well, when you host a program and you aren't getting enough attention, reach out to the CEO and say, guess what? It's Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. We would love for you to open up the conversation and talk about why you support us as Latinx professionals here, right? And the CEO is gonna be like, uh-oh, I gotta make time for these people. Wonderful, right? And they actually do, they show up a lot of times, and it's absolutely beautiful. What else could we add, Victoria?
I would encourage us all to build for scale. I would encourage us to be strategic systems thinkers. I think that often we're focusing a lot of our attention on one-off events and programs. And that means that we are double taxing our employees quite a bit and at multiple points throughout the year. And we are already likely raising our hands for extra work in our core roles. And so I think it's important to encourage and also help direct that what we're building is a rinse and repeat if it's a topic that's going to come up a lot. If you're putting together panels, let's package them. Let's not put the ownership on the local chapters to figure out what content needs to be and who the speakers are and what the facilitation process is. We have those connections. Let's develop that resource for them so that then we can ship that out and they have this great thing that they get to take and get visibility for delivering. And so I think what I have really been so proud of with the Latinx group at Meta is that they do take that approach. And so often what we're building can also be replicated in another employee resource group when they're coming to a similar point of a topic or maybe an issue that they need to be really wrapping their arms around.
I love that. We've come to the portion in our session for Q&A. So if you're here in the room, my beautiful colleagues are in the aisles holding a microphone, and if you have a question, please approach them. I see someone right here. If you're virtual as well, please send us some questions in the chat box.
Hi, my name is Juan Diaz with Ecolab, and it's my first year as a enterprise lead of ERG. I work in the field, so I don't go to an office, so it's been a big transition, right? And when I think about it, I would like us to focus on that pipeline, right? And that kind of helping the business bring that talent. And I think a lot of times not everybody has visibility or exposure, right? So I would like you to talk about how an ERG can help bring exposure to those individuals, right? That maybe have the talent, but they're either shy or don't necessarily know how to approach that process, right? How to own their career, which is something that we hear all the time. So if you can kind of maybe talk a little bit about that, about how the ERGs played that role and kind of maybe can partner with HR, talent acquisition, and how us as leaders of those ERGs can really help bring those, those individuals and give them visibility. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take a sec. So it starts with, I think, education and awareness, right? So if you look at career success, and I don't know, Harvey Coleman wrote a book, he talks about PI. PI stands for performance, image, and exposure. And there's and each represents a portion of that pie. So growing up as a Latino in a very blue collar household, I was taught, hey, keep your head down, do good work, and they'll get noticed. Well, that works good to a certain extent, but then there becomes a moment in your career where what got you here won't get you there. And so understanding and educating on performance is foundational, but it's only 10% of your success story. Image and exposure represents the rest. And so how do you do that within your practice, within your functional area? Understanding who has a seat at the table, and then encourage and just have that real talk with our people to say, look, you need to kind of find ways to set yourself apart either. So at Accenture, we have our clients, we have our community, which is our office, and then we have the practice everyone belongs to. One of those three, find a way to engage and an opportunity to stand out and create that image and exposure for yourself with the leadership team. So for us, we provide that real talk and that awareness and education that say performance, yes, is important, and you have to do the work, you have to excel at it. But again, just be mindful that's only a portion of your career success story. So
I'd also add to include it in your individual development plans if you have some at your organization. So that way it's not just a nice thing to do, it's actually helping you with your development. And the last piece that I would say is there's so many opportunities out there when it comes to leadership. And so even partnering with AHCR, there's so many great programs that will help your leaders. Again, the investment is in your leadership. So how do you help as the leader, your teams, to ensure that they're getting the leadership skills that they need to keep growing as leaders down the road as they grow in your company?
I love that. Next question, please. Perfect.
Glenda Valero with Chevron. I'm also executive sponsor for our ERG with the Latinos in our company. Following up on Priscilla's comment that you just made, one of the challenges that we have is how do we make sure supervisors, frontline supervisors, are supportive and encouraging of this experience. In many occasions for them, it's a volunteer, it's on the extra time, and it's perceived as a nice to have. So what have you done in your organizations to amplify the value that it's real business experience that they're getting and get supervisors to be supportive and encouraging of these opportunities?
If I would talk about a few things here. I think one, if we get back to the executive sponsor and the role that they can play in reward and recognition, I think it's really important that we're tapping into that. So for us, some of the things that we look at is who has really gone above and beyond. If you are driving a community summit with us, if you are helping to lead cultural heritage moments, we want to make sure that we're recognizing you, and we work through our executive sponsors so that they actually will send a note directly to that person's manager. And so it's not on that employee to go and advocate and say, look at all this great work. They should still be doing that. They should still write that into their goals for the year, but also we would ensure that we're giving that reward and recognition from the visibility that really matters. And so I think tapping into your leadership teams and how can you in your role help provide some of that visibility for the community members, I think is really important.
The other part I would add is from a culture perspective, if your company's ready to include that in the performance piece, right? As I mentioned earlier, that your individual development plans, are they ready to have that be? Some of us have certain percentages that go, right, and it connects to your merit. And so how is your company structured? Are they ready for that so that it connects back to getting that merit in your pocket?
Nice, thank you. Right over here.
Oh, hi, I'm Guillermo Hernandez again. Just a question for you. So similar to that question. So in my case, it's a little different where, our executive is definitely on board on all this. And so is my immediate manager. But sometimes we're getting a little bit more pushback. I don't want to say pushback, but question about our time in that middle management space. Do you have any recommendations for that? How to get more support when it comes to middle management area?
I would first start at the top. I think especially if you do have that support at your leadership levels, you really do want to put some of that ownership to amplify and engage other people in this work and understand the value of it back on those executives. it's interesting to hear that actually your managers are the area that feels like they do understand the work, and it's that middle layer. I think part of it is also evangelizing about your work. Like, do not be ashamed to amplify what is happening and the value that it's bringing back to the business, and having your executives also double down on that messaging. So maybe it's the next time you're sharing out about a program, it's not coming from the employee directly, perhaps it comes from the executive sponsor, and they're highlighting, look at all of this great work and how it ties back to our company's mission as well. I think that's really important when we're trying to influence that middle, right? Because they have a business to run, and we are at for-profit companies. And so how do we help support the business while also ensuring that we are getting that reward and recognition that we deserve?
Thank you for that question. Right over here.
From our virtual audience, and it reads, while I support allies and one in the other BRGs, I feel that a space needs to be there for you to be able to speak in Spanglish. For example, discuss those first generation experiences, and when you have allies attend those meetings, the dynamic changes. How do you stay respectful? And the continuation is, I think there needs to be meetings where others invited and some when not, but would love some coaching here. So the question is, how do you stay respectful?
In summary. Thank you.
So you have to create that safe space for folks to have the conversations. I don't necessarily, this is my opinion, I don't think that we should create this fishbowl of having non-Latinos kind of listen to, kind of what goes on, and just the vulnerable. I think there has to be trust in order for folks to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And if that trust isn't there, I don't advocate for engaging those types of sessions. But I will challenge those folks that don't understand the community to just take a chance and just have a conversation, right? Take the moment to have a conversation, to learn about that individual. Susana, who's from High Tech, she was on our panel for the kickoff of Hispanic Heritage Month. And she said, use Hispanic Heritage Month as a ticket to have that conversation. So, if there's a situation where you can, have someone engage in that conversation, encourage them, right? Because being a leader, right, and being an advocate for our community is kind of speaking up. And so it's not our job to educate others, but encourage those folks to take a leap and just engage in the conversation.
Beautiful. Our next question.
I could go. Okay, cool. Thank you. Hello, my name is Arturo Delgado. I work at Best Buy. Woo woo.
Yes!
Really, woo!
Go Best Buy!
I was the one yelling over here, so.
I love it.
But I have a question for Victoria, specifically since I work in the cybersecurity software engineering realm. And really what I want to know is, I'm new to the corporate world in general. I've only been working about for a year, and specifically in the tech world. And what are the things that BRGs can do to really guide and use the strengths of Latinos and Hispanic people alike to really excel in the tech world and really be able to shine and move up to those leadership positions? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Also, I used to work at Best Buy when I was in college, so I do have a soft spot. What I would say is, one, to look at companies like this, right? So where are the spaces and places that you can bring Latinos from your organization to, where they are meeting with others, they're learning the best practices? You have really great organizations that are focused on engineering specifically, so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think also it's what can you create internally? So there's likely going to be a few other people who are potentially more competent in a certain area than others. Can they start to have some type of learning or onboarding circle? For me, when I first joined Meta, I actually was in what we call our familia circles. And so that meant that I had a group of people I did not know, but that reached out to me, were like, we'd love for you to be in our circle and just start to meet us and get to know. And I learned so much about all these different parts of the company. And so sometimes it's like bringing people in their same organization together to do that learning. Sometimes it's across the company. Perhaps you want to bring engineering and product into one room, because they're going to learn a lot more about how to build quickly and across a cross-functional team than if we're just talking to ourselves. So I would say external corporations, where can you be so that you're learning about what is on the cutting edge? And then internally, how do we actually reach across and help one another so that we're upskilling ourselves in our roles?
Fantastic. I believe that is it for all of the questions. Thank you so much. Please, if you have a question and you're here virtually, make sure that you keep engaging with us. Send them all in because these lovely individuals will reply back to you if you add them on LinkedIn. I want to thank you all for your time and your energy, your incredible, insight in being leaders in not just ERGs, but our joint experience. Because whether you know it or not, you're an extension of your brands. And so we appreciate you being here and supporting HACR. For everyone that has not added Elliot, Priscilla, and Victoria on LinkedIn, do it right now. And post a picture so that you can go to Caesars. Yes, right now, because you will win. And thank you all so much. Let's have a round of applause for them. Fantastic. Our sessions will resume at 3 o'clock, it seems. So thank you
Take
all.
this time to stretch your legs, refill your cafecito, and join us back here at 3 p.m. Pacific Time for Learning Lessons, Secrets from Diversity Leadership. Hasta pronto.